Take some notes if I'm in your shoes. This week and for the rest of what's remaining of the semester, we're going to work from this skeleton still life that's out here. It's made up of a couple of skeletons, some skulls, but also other things that are spindly and linear. There's some sticks and spoons and saw blades and stuff like that, flowers and plant items, all that have a linear, spindly nature to them, for the most part. There's a few things that don't necessarily. And our technique that we're going to work with this week is referred to as sort of a flip-flop of what you've been doing, rather than finished to unfinished. Rather than unfinished to finished, we're working in finished to unfinished, starting this week. I'd make a note of it. Finished to unfinished. While you're doing that, I'm going to close this door. Like I said, I was. Barely cold. So, this time around, what we'll do is you will draw from the still life the portion of the still life that you're interested in, and you'll begin by doing exactly what we've been doing for the past 3 weeks, working through that same 3-step process, blocking in your composition lightly, gesturally, coming in with a confident line work, finally putting in your line variation, so that you have a finished drawing on the page. Then we're going to go right on top of that with some more unfinished marks that are meant to show themselves. You have 2 tools in your arsenal, but I'm limiting how you can use them. One, and I'll talk about the reasons why we're using them in a moment. One is gestural marks put right on top of the drawing, like the ones you can sort of see reverberating around these skeletons here. These really wild ones that this student is using going around this. Right, there must be some sort of unfinished gestural marks that you put into your drawing. But also, you're allowed to bring in, using either the charcoal or the Conte, that stick, a little bit of value being some darkness on the page, where you put down, just like we did at midterm when we were making those massing drawings, putting the stick of charcoal or Conte down on its side and dragging it along the paper. But you may only do it in one of 2 ways. One is to either fill in and mass in a shape that's defined by lines that you have on the page already, or by putting in a line itself, right? Like you can see how this person sort of dragged this along and then followed that shape, or up here where they followed along like so. And then they masked in here. That is allowed, but you must keep it limited. We don't put it everywhere. Why? Well, because once you have a drawing that has a consistent visual language throughout, and that's what you end up having after you've gone through this 3-step process that you've been learning for the last 3 weeks, if you add anything into that mix that looks different, our eyes just can't help but want to look there. Our eyes get immediately drawn to that thing that looks different from everything else. Right? You have a big giant jar of green M&Ms and you throw one red M&M in there, that's the one you're going to notice. Your eyes are immediately going to notice that there's this one that looks different than the rest. So this becomes a means of creating emphasis. Emphasis, when we talk about emphasis in art, that's a means of getting our eyes to notice that something is important. Right? So, after you have made your initial line drawing, I'm going to want you to either choose a focal point. I would make notes of this. A focal point being this is where I want people to look first. Or a compositional pathway meant to lead us through the drawing. A focal point or a compositional pathway. A path that you want our eyes to follow through your drawing. All right, these unfinished marks and value that are so different from the rest of the drawing will, by necessity, draw our eyes to where those marks are. So we can use them to say, hey, look here first. Or we can say, hey, look at this, then this, then this, then this, then this. Follow this pathway I'm creating within my composition. So what is this person doing? Well, they have clearly made the sort of pelvic bone the focal point of this drawing. They've done so by right around the outside of it, going in with these really dark, really thick gestural marks. They're scratching around it, scratch, 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 right? That's already kind of doing the trick, but then they did a couple other things. Any place where there's a bone that is near the this pelvic bone, notice how they put a little bit of that kind of same line work right around these edges of the contours and then let it trail back into the more confident line work that was already there. Then they took the side of their Conte or charcoal, whichever it was they had. They filled in a few of these shapes here and even put a little bit around this. Some of this down here I think was unnecessary because this kind of distracts from it. But still, it's a pretty strong indication that this is where we're meant to look, and then our eyes can wander elsewhere if we want them to. You have this person who's noticing a pathway that goes around, like up this was like a cow skull. Man, I wish we still had cow skulls here. I had these at Memphis College of Art, but I don't have them here. Up and around this cow skull, and then over, and then up around in here and around this. Right? They're taking us on that journey by giving us these reverberating gestural marks. Now, in their case, they didn't use any value. Value, whether you put value into the drawing or not, is optional. These gestural marks, however, are not. You have this student who has created a skull here. You're lucky he got up and let you in. I said in that video that I'm going to start locking that door from now on because I'm getting tired of what a big portion of the class shows up late. So the skull, they put dark, thick gestural marks around, right, and that reverberate and pull our attention here. But they also are like, well, you know what? I've also got these bones that are already kind of pointing me toward it. So I'm going to, wherever they get near this, I'm going to put some extra oomph to those as well. And they brought a little bit of value into that eye socket and right in there. That draws our eyes' attentions to this focal point. Now, this student really got into this whole thing and maybe put a little too much of the gestural marks. But they certainly have given us, with all of these nice dark marks right here, a pathway that sort of leads us up and around all of this stuff. Again, in their case, not putting in any of the value with the side of the Conte. This student, it's not the best example. I kind of wish they would have limited themselves a bit more, but you can see them trying to give us like a pathway that comes up and around this, and then over into here, and then around the skull, and then maybe up into this. But they put a little too much extra, I think, in between these ribs, so it distracts from that a bit. But I can see this right here, right? This little path down, over, up, around, there. This student who's, I think maybe used a little too much value, but is trying to make the focal point this rib cage. That way of doing so is coming in with some dark gestural marks around it, and then trying to put the value down into some of the negative spaces to push the rib cage forward. And then, again, we can wander and look at other things if we want. So, but again, the first step is just to get your line drawing in place. Working through that same 3-step process that we've been doing. Get your composition in place. What I'll do is I'll put a 40-minute timer for that, like what we've been doing. Today, you might not even get to a point where you're putting down any of the gestural marks or value. Or you might. But the point is, I don't want you rushing to try to make it happen today. Get your line drawing in. That's the thing of main importance. Now, when you go out here, sometimes there are students who will go out to the still life already thinking ahead, like, all right, this is the portion I'm interested in drawing, and I think I'm going to make this particular thing into the focal point. Or I already see how this object points me toward this object points me toward that one, and so I think later on I'm going to emphasize that pathway. Other students are like, I don't know, I'm just going to draw what I see and I'll figure it out later. And that's okay too. Because oftentimes students will have a drawing, they're not certain what they want to do, but then they think, oh wait, yeah, within my drawing I've got something to draw attention to. Now, again, when it comes to putting in value, you'll note that for the most part, that value is not dependent upon any of these drawings where you see light and shadow. That's not the point of this. We'll get into some drawings next week where you can bring in light and shadow. That is perfectly allowable then. Right now, it is all about creating emphasis. So again, your 2 rules when it comes to value is that you can mass in a shape, a full shape, or you can put down a line. Like the line you see this person dragging along right there or up here. Right? The gestural marks, think back to midterm when we were making those gesture drawings and the way that you would move your hand. Whichever of those you liked, then go with it. If it was those quick marks that we made as you ran around something, or if it was, say, that curvilinear where you get your hand jittering like crazy. I think that was what this student was doing. Hence why marks are going like all over the place. She really got into this. I've got a couple other examples of hers from what we do next week. Right, that kind of thing, right, is a very different language from the rest of the drawing and is going to draw our attention to it.